Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's 2020 Restaurant Industry Loss Cost Trends webinar, How Do You Compare? My name is Michelle Okolo, and I'm the Marketing Business Partner here at Marsh for Marsh's Restaurant Industry Practice. On behalf of John Logan and the Restaurant Industry Practice here at Marsh, I'd like to thank you for joining us this afternoon. We have an engaging, insights-packed hour in store for you, where our experts will be going over a lot of the key findings from the 2020 Restaurant Industry Loss Cost Trends Report. So without any further ado, I would like to go ahead and get started. But just to remind you, as you have questions or any things that you'd like to ask the panel, please type it into the Q&A chat and we'll get to your questions and your answers as soon as possible. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. All right, so our speakers for today are David Olson. David is also known as our data whisperer here at Marsh. Data was responsible basically for getting together and gathering all the data in this fabulous report that you guys have. He was responsible for gathering your insights, responses to your survey, and interpreting those into the charts and reports that you have in front of you. Next, we have Cindy Smale. Cindy, some of you may know her as the risk manager from Domino's, but today to us, she is our food and beverage leader here at Marsh Advisory. And Cindy was instrumental in gathering all the data and translating that into practical risk management strategies and advice for you all. Thanks for joining us, Cindy and David. Last but not least, we have Joe Griswold. Joe is our claims guru, and Joe is with Marsh Advisory's claims consulting practice. Joe would be helping to interpret how some of this data translates into the claims experience for you. So welcome aboard, speakers, and let's go into our agenda for today. So we'll start with a quick overview, which I will cover about the background of the report. And then next we'll go right into David Olson, who will go over some of the key findings from the study, followed by Cindy Smale, who will talk about some of the insights from a workers' comp and a GL perspective and some best practices. And then we'll have a great panel discussion for you all, where Joe Griswold will go over some of the claims consulting, as well as Cindy Smale and David Olson will have a robust conversation around some of the insights from the study. And then we'll close with a Q&A. Just quickly, I just wanted to mention that this is our third edition of this report, and it has continued to grow strong. We have over 80 participants, 80 brands that were participating in the last study, representing over about 3,000 locations. Participation has remained strong, so I just want to say thank you to all of you that participated in this survey. And then lastly, this survey is something that was put together by your peers. So this is really tailored to you. So I would like to thank Paul Beatty from Portillo's, Rob Benke from Cracker Barrel Old Country Store, and last but not least, Cindy Drury from Panera for their help and assistance in putting together this report. All right, so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to David Olson. David, the floor is yours.
Excellent, Michelle. Thank you very, very much for that introduction and for herding the cats to get this all together. This is wonderful to be with everyone today. And it really is exciting to share about the report we put together end of last year. To echo Michelle's comments, a big thank you. This is the restaurant group that John Logan heads up and that many of you participate in is just a wonderful group of collaboration that this report would not be possible without you. This is the data that the industry provides. Thank you to everyone who put up with my chasing emails over the last 12 months to get the data pulled together and for the survey responses that you so kindly shared so that we could deliver these insights to you today. If we look at the next slide, just a quick overview of kind of the report, what it entails. As Michelle mentioned, this is the third edition of this report. The first came out in 2015, and we're excited to kind of take a little bit of a look back today to see how do we compare from back then to today. But again, the strong participation, I mean, so many restaurants participating. We had over 80 brands and those participating in the survey and also the claims data that is shared over 30,000 locations across the US on the restaurant side is represented within this data. Definitely, for those of you who've seen the report, who've gotten your hands on it, it goes into depth, shall we say, not only trending losses, but also taking kind of a 5-year snapshot of losses. And then on the risk management side, those best practices. What are your peers doing? What are your colleagues doing across the industry to help manage the risk that is very evident within our industry here? Definitely, what we have heard is that being able to take these insights, to have this data quantified, allows conversations at the corporate level to really drive home the points that risk managers so often are trying to make. There is an impact. There is a benefit to understanding data so that you can then drive those conversations both on the pre-loss and the post-loss side to engage across the business and really bring home the value of risk management within your company. That's our hope. That was the initial conversation over 5 years ago when John Logan was asking the restaurant practice what would be beneficial to that Marsh could do to really support this industry. And one of the strong things that came back was, can we get data? Can we understand the experience across the industry so that we can drive these conversations forward? And we're happy to be able to provide that in the form of this report. Again, the 3rd iteration, and looking forward, hopefully, very shortly to the 4th one as well. On our next slide, I thought that just from a high level perspective here at the beginning, right? Want to cover the 2 halves of the claim data, the workers' compensation, and then we'll take a look at the GL side. But just real quick, what does a workers' compensation claim look like? And thinking about this data that we have, and where is it coming from? So this last report covered 2015 through 2019, so 5 years of claim data. And if we just kind of look at the base statistics from workers' compensation in the restaurant industry, the average cost of a claim, $4,800 basically for a workers' compensation claim. If you move into the lost time category, obviously the cost goes up quite a bit. We're looking at almost $26,000 for a lost time claim. Definitely bringing into light, bringing into focus the need to manage those well, not only for the colleagues and the team members, but also being responsible within the restaurant, within the risk management space. When we think about reporting claims, 85% of comp claims are reported within 7 days. Slight improvement from back in 2015. I don't think it was 84%, so a very slight improvement, but moving in the right direction for sure. 72% of claims are closed within the first year. Falls, slips, and trips, Cindy will definitely get into this, but that continues to be an issue within the industry for sure. When you look at the result of the claims, what are the injuries that are coming out of this? Sprains, strains, dislocations, those type of injuries are definitely a driving factor within the severity of the cost component. 41% of the cost within the industry was being driven on the comp side out of these type of injuries. Interesting thing when you think about your workforce, obviously within restaurants, there's high churn within a workforce, but just looking at the numbers, 55% of frequency, 43% of severity is coming from individuals who are with the firm less than 2 years. Michelle, if we could go to the next slide and we'll take a look at the GL. So what does a GL claim look like? Just shy of $7,000 on average for a general liability claim. If we want to focus that down a little bit more on the liability side to just those that are litigated, you're looking at just shy of $50,000 for a litigated file. Within those litigated claims, about 25% of that cost we're seeing right now over the last 5 years going toward the expense of those litigated claims. 85% being closed within the first 12 months, which is great. Very similar over on the comp side. And that really, you get a lot of low dollar value claims in the door, but still being able to close those out quickly gives the ability to keep those costs down. Falls, slips, and trips, obviously, as guests are coming on premises, going through the parking lots, sidewalks, rugs, and everything within the restaurants, definitely an issue that we're seeing within claims. The interesting thing I wanted to bring out with these last 2 points here, claimant age of over 70 years of age for the claimant. The average cost is $15,000 for a claim, litigated or not litigated, just an average cost of a claim, which as we look at the data within the report and we kind of bucketed out the age of the claimants within general liability, that bucket was definitely the most expensive on average. But when you look at this last point here, the claimant age between 35 and 54, that was 34% of your frequency and 36% of severity. So when we have these conversations regarding, which claims to focus on, which claims to pay attention to, those where the claimant's age is more up in years, definitely that influences cost. But we're still seeing from a frequency standpoint, as well as the overall bucket of money that is allocated to claims, this 35 to 54-year-old demographic of claimant is definitely still driving the driving force within GL experience within the industry. I'm often asked kind of, so what within the data is of note? Here's what a GL claim looks like. We looked at what a work comp claim looks like, but kind of looking beyond that, what do we see within the data that we really need to be thinking about? And on the next slide, we're talking kind of back on the workers' compensation slide or side of the house. And this is where we really got into kind of taking a look back. We now have 10 years of data that we've been able to work with and analyze, and what stories are we seeing out of that? 2 graphs here, but they're kind of put next to each other to form a continuous story across the 10 years of data. This is specifically looking at lost time claims, and it's specifically, it locked all of the claims in at 12 months. For the 2010 claims, what did 2010 lost time workers' compensation claim look like at the end of 2010? For any of these years, jump forward to 2016. What did a 2016 claim look like at the end of 2016? So that gives us the ability to kind of take development out of the picture for a moment and just see the pure trend across the years. And what we saw from 2010 to 2014 is there was an increase within that 5-year period in the average cost of a lost time claim at 12 months. Inflation happens, it is to be expected. But when you saw the trend kind of start to truly increase after 2015 up through 2019, and you see kind of 16 and 19 stand out as kind of expensive years within the workers' compensation world, within the data set that we had to analyze, there's, this is a trend to keep an eye on. I took a look at, there was a question that came through, is this just the increase in medical costs? This outpaced medical inflation. So it wasn't purely influenced by the increasing cost of medical treatment, which is definitely a factor, but it went beyond that. So as we look to the next iteration of this report, it will be interesting to see where that trend goes. And especially given this past 12 months, right? 2020 is going to be a very interesting year to look back and see, how did that impact the frequency side? How did that impact the severity side? And how do we understand that within the scope of the report as we've been able to work with the data over the past decade? On the GL side, this next slide really talks about the average cost of a claim. And I think I don't have to reiterate, but I think most of us have definitely experienced some aggressive increases within the casualty markets with placements that have happened over the past 12 to 18 months. And there's definitely some trends in the data that we're seeing to kind of support that. I know I've spoken just through my colleagues at Marsh, as well as hearing from the carriers as well, that the settlements are increasing. The costs are going up within general liability, and we see that mirrored in the reports as we look back to 2015, and then we look to 2020 reports. 5 years ago, the average cost of a GL claim was $4,700. When we look at the 2020 numbers, the average cost of a GL claim was almost $7,000. So that's a significant increase period over period. And it definitely kind of aligns, I think, with a lot of the experience that we're hearing, maybe tangentially, but being able to see that in the hard numbers, that as an industry, and it's definitely not contained to the restaurant industry, but specifically within the restaurant industry data that we have the ability to analyze, we are seeing a significant increase over the 5 years as far as the cost of a general liability claim, which again just is a reflection into what's happening within the markets themselves. I think is a very good story to understand out of this, and can even then influence conversations around the importance of managing risk well within the industry, as well as the conversations that inevitably happen as you bring an unfortunate increase, or maybe a great a reduced increase back to management, and say, we were able to get a great win on our insurance. It doesn't look like it, but let's talk about what's happening across the industry. So it's always great to have these numbers to reflect back, and to take the data that you're so gracious to share with us, and to give you the insights that can then lead into great risk management conversations within your organization. Michelle, before I hand it on to Cindy, I know that we've had the QA up. Have any questions come through that I should answer at this point?
Actually, yes, a question did come through the chat, and I would like to remind everyone, if you have any questions for David, please put them into the Q&A panel and he'll gladly answer them. But David, one question came in. How can we get a copy of this report?
Oh, sure. Great question. So the basic mechanism that we have for this for participating in this report, we will take the restaurant email list that John Logan manages through his work with the restaurant group, and we'll basically issue an invitation for this next iteration. It will likely be coming out later this year, and we just issue an invitation to participate. It's a quick survey that you can take to say, yes, I want to participate. And then it will launch you into the process of, there's two components: sharing your claim data, and then taking a best practices survey. Doing so makes you a participant in the report, and then you get a free copy of the overall industry report as a thank you for participating. Excellent question.
Good. We have another question that came in. When talking about average claims, are you including those reported but with nothing paid, or just those claims that have incurred amounts?
Excellent question. Yes. So when we do all of our numbers within the report, we exclude those $0. So some we would just term those as incidents or report onlys. It's possible that they'll grow into a claim, but for the purposes of analysis and kind of working across many different TPAs, many different philosophies of claim management, we just kind of level set within the data and say, let's just remove the $0 claims and only work with those who have some amount occurred. It may not have been paid yet, but we work off of those total incurred numbers. So excellent question.
Okay, that's it for now.
Wonderful. Well, then I would love to bring Cindy into the conversation. Cindy has a lot of experience within the restaurant industry. I know a number of you have worked with her and Cindy. Love to hear your insights as you looked at the information.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. And welcome everybody to the call. It's so much fun to talk about data, I know, but what I really am interested in and think about is, okay, so we have this great pot of data. What are we going to do about it? What can we do to know what to move on to and help reduce some of these claims? So hopefully we'll eventually put David out of business. He'll have a whole bunch of zeros and he won't have anything to talk about. So talking about workers' comp first, well, the leading cause for severity is still slips, trips, and falls. So we know they represent about 37% of the total incurred cost for these types of claims for workers' comp, and that's the same as it's been for since the survey started, really. So when we think about that, we think about well, if it's the same as it's been for so long, what can we do to impact that loss? Well, first of all, is really look at your slip resistant shoe program. I know many brands have a requirement for slip resistant shoes, which is great, but we have to make sure that they're worn, that they're in good condition, and that they're good quality. And we learned from the survey too that 85% of those people that took the survey said that their company doesn't fund the shoe program fully. So that might be an opportunity where people are buying less quality shoes, they wear out quickly, and pretty soon you have a flat sole on the floor, which doesn't protect them. So thinking about that. Also review your floor cleaning practices and program. You should be using proper chemicals and you should be using those chemicals properly. So often we find that it's not just the way you're you're cleaning, but the way you're cleaning can actually increase slips and falls if not done properly. And then the other thing we learned from this study is about cuts. So if we're talking about frequency of injury claims, it's cuts, punctures, and scrapes leads the pack with 23% of the claims. You see that little bubble? And so thinking about that, quite often it's about knives or sharps handling, how those are being handled, inconsistent use of cut gloves. And sometimes that's because they're not available, they're not the right size, they might not be clean, but there's a reason why people aren't wearing cut gloves. Quite often it can be that nobody actually asks about it or asks them to put it on if they don't have it on. And then thinking about broken glass and dishware. So sometimes folks are surprised when they reach into a sink and get cut or have a bit of a broken glass that they try to pick up with their fingers instead of using some sort of other tool. So those are the main things when we think about cuts that we're looking at. Okay, and then an interesting thing in this survey that's different on the next slide, we're talking about motor vehicle collisions. So this is the first time we really talked about that on one of these calls. And you'll notice when you look at the causes and the dollars, or not the causes, the claim average and the dollars, motor vehicle accidents tend to be a really big number. So that we have lots of claims for other types of things, but the claims average incurred for motor vehicle accidents is $9,668. And the lost time average incurred is over $70,000. So that's twice the cost of what slip, strips, and falls claims are. And that's a big concern, especially when 2020 hit and many of the restaurants started doing some sort of delivery or catering and having cars driving around out there. So um, we know that you might have more folks or more restaurants that are doing this type of delivery, and you have to think about what are the types of reasons that people get hurt on the way or on the way back delivering that product. So thinking about mitigation measures that you might not have had before, thinking about slips and falls and general liability claims. This is a kind of a new one. And this was before the pandemic. So you might know that in 2020, the frequency for these claims probably went up, and it's possible the cost did too. I guess we'll find out when David does the next round. All right, so what do we do about those auto claims? Let's go to the next slide and talk about in-house delivery risk mitigation. So this isn't like an Uber Eats or other delivery practice. This is you hiring someone to go out and make deliveries for you or catering that you might have. So for auto collisions, the first thing we're always looking for is policies, practices, procedures, safety rules, that kind of thing. So we know you're going to hire a driver with a driver's license. Like they know how to physically drive, but what is it that you want them to do while they're working for you? What are your safety rules? For instance, how do you address cell phone use? So that's one of those things. Then driver selection and monitoring, MVRs, motor vehicle reports, criminal histories, near and dear to my heart. and the most important cornerstone you can have when you're building a program. Hazard assessments, what kind of things do drivers encounter that nobody else does? So maybe it's about driver distraction while they're on the road. Or maybe it's about things that happen at the customer's house. They have to get from their vehicle up to the house without tripping on something in the yard or being bitten by the mean dog. So those kinds of things. And then there's training. So again, they're going to come with a driver's license, but you have to train them about your policies and about driving in the dark and pedestrians and backing in driveways and all of those kinds of things. And we learned from the survey, only about half of the restaurants surveyed used specialized training in this area. So that's a big hole that can have people end up getting into claims and getting hurt. And there's some liability that goes along with that as well. So think about that. Inspection and maintenance, you need to make sure the vehicle is safe that the driver is driving. And if it's in your own fleet, you're going to make sure that you follow those maintenance records as well. And then the last one is collision reporting and investigation. So there might be a collision that happens. You need to train people and have policies on how to report, make sure that reporting process is sound, and investigate it so that it doesn't happen again. So this is something brand new that as you moved potentially into delivery for the pandemic and maybe are using it going forward, we're gonna have to think about. All right, so let's go to general liability. So you heard David mention, you saw the little icon on that chart, the little circle had fall guys on it, and both of those slides, someone falling. So we know that general liability causes, the number one type of GL cause is falls. They account for 36% of the claims frequency in the restaurants surveyed, and 61% of the total incurred cost. And on David's slide, he talked about those that are 70 years old older. If you have a 70+ person guest fall in your location, it can be very expensive and impactful to the rest of their lives. The average claim cost was $10,852, and it was about $5 grand more, I think, on David's charts for that 70+ over. So what do you do about those kinds of falls that happen? Well, the first thing is you really need to do hazard analysis. You need to determine what the root cause of those falls are as much as you can, know that they're guess, investigate it, find out what, take pictures, find out what the floor looked like. Is it because of a broken floor tile? Is it because there was water on the floor? Is it because the floors are made slippery because we're not using the chemicals right? All of those things can help feed back in. And one thing about this is clean, dry, well-maintained, well-cleaned floors will keep your customers from falling as well as your team members from falling. So that's a win-win in my book. All right, so we talked a little bit about workers' comp, we talked specifically about auto, and then we talked about GL. Let's talk about overall best practices and strategies to think about when it comes to loss control. So you heard me talk about a hazard analysis or an investigation of an incident. We also really like gap assessments. So a gap assessment is different. A gap assessment takes an unvarnished, comprehensive review of everything that contributes to loss control in your company. So looking at things like leadership, looking at policies and procedures, practices, equipment, supplies, all of those things, putting it all together and finding out where are things kind of a little different than we thought they were, and where do we have opportunities. Because often when I talk to companies, I say, what do you think is causing these injuries? And it's always like training, it's training. We need to train our people better. Might not always be training. We can't assume we know what it is until we've done the research to figure that out. And then evaluate the current programs and policies, knowing what you found out in that gap assessment, what's working, what doesn't work, and what might have changed in the last year with the pandemic. Most restaurants I know closed for at least a period of time, and many of them dumped their restaurants physically into the parking lot and worked there. And so an awful lot has changed over the last year, and we shouldn't assume we know what those are without researching them. Look at modifying existing training if the gap assessment says it's needed. We definitely have to train on anything we do new or different as we move along. And I don't want to minimize training, but it's not always the top cause. And think about equipment and your equipment approval process. As you're doing new things, putting new equipment in place, putting a different product on the line, all of the equipment processes and protocols may change. And if safety is involved in the very beginning, there's a very good chance that you're going to be redesigning that later on, and it is way more painful to do that than it is to catch in the beginning. So if I know we only have a small amount of time to spend on this, but at Marsh we do these kind of things with clients every day and are always happy to talk about how to put David out of work with claims. So Michelle, I see the red button there. Do we have a question?
Yes, we do, but we do have one question that was earlier submitted. That question was, what are common themes you find during the gap analysis?
Oh, yeah. So I'm a bit of a sleuth and pretty nosy at heart, most will tell you. So I love doing gap analysis because you always find out things that are different from what you thought they were. Um, we turn over all the rocks when we do a gap analysis. You would as well. And often what we find is that just the connections aren't there that we thought were there. You might have great written policy and procedure, for instance, but it's not maintained or implemented at the restaurant level. So for instance, you may have a cut glove policy, and we see this as one of the common findings. Cut glove use policy says it's in place. We got to do it. And people think, oh, we're having these injuries. We got to train better. Well, really, what it is there's not enough cut gloves in the location, or maybe they're the wrong size, or maybe after training, nobody was even asked to put one on or given any guidance on how important it was to wear it after that. So just connecting those things that you might have a policy for, but it's not maintained lower on. That's the main thing. And then we also find out that like policies and procedures aren't updated for changes that are made. And then goals and objectives. If your leadership team doesn't have goals and objectives around loss control in a gap analysis, that's a big find and something we think about regularly. And also, Michelle, I kind of didn't say it earlier, but a gap analysis is a big project. We also have the Marsh complementary tool, the Safety Performance Index, that can help companies with a self-assessment kind of figure out where they might want to spend some time and energy and work towards a gap analysis or thoughts for that. So that story is always there too.
Thank you, Cindy. So we have another question. Around the drink areas with manual pour of soda, ice that have overflow, spill, etc., what do you recommend to reduce that activity? More regular checks of that area, signage, moving the drink stand behind the counter?
Yeah, people love those drink stands. I love them too, except for when I hate them because of the floor. You're absolutely right. It's a big problem. During the pandemic, most of those were put behind the counter anyway, but I think that the self-service portion of our restaurants will come back. I think the first thing is to make sure that the drainage in the system is working properly and you don't overflow. So then you're just getting the spillage from when people are sloshing their cups, that kind of thing. Make sure you have matting or some sort of waffle area there, and really frequent checks. If you can locate it where someone at the front counter can see it, they can simply look up, see if there's a problem, and then address it as if they see someone spill or if they see that there's an issue. But definitely an area where more frequent moppings help. Keep in mind, mopping during when customers are there can be problems too. So you got to have that wet floor sign up, wet mop then dry mop, so that they don't end up falling anyway. It's a good question.
Yep. All right. I don't think I see any more. Again, a reminder, everyone, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A and our wonderful panel will be glad to answer them. Thanks, Cindy.
You're very welcome. And I think, Michelle, we have a survey question now.
Yes, we do. We have a nice interactive poll. So
Excellent.
pull that up.
All right, so Michelle is going to launch that poll. We wanted to get your opinions on some pieces that came along. So looking at the trends report, our question is, given the disruption of COVID-19 over the past 12 months, what is your next big project or priority on the horizon? It is multiple choice, so you can say all of those if you think that's something that you can say, or you can say one or two, but we're kind of just looking for what are the things you're working on? Because we see light at the end of the tunnel, and hope you do too. And at some point, we hope we can move on away from COVID. All right, so when that gets to be close to done, Michelle will.
Yeah, I think we have.
Yes, and just while the participants are interacting with that, Cindy, I just want to share not only a thanks for your insights today, but also for just hanging out that goal for everyone to put me out of business and turn the report into complete zero. So
There's a lot of other insights you can be working on. I'm really certain. We'll figure that one out.
Indeed, excellent. Well, it looks like we have good participation in the poll. And just taking a look here, I'm just going to kind of read down. Looks like our top initiative that people are thinking about is, 73% of those who responded are looking at their safety programs. Always a wonderful thing to think about, and especially you know, thing that comes to mind on Cindy's comments there, yes, things changed greatly in 2020, right? And we do hope that there's some light at the end of the tunnel to get back to what we were used to. But there's also going to be that transition time, and so keeping an eye on the safety is definitely something to do during that transition period. Hard markets, yes. I am not on the brokerage side, but I definitely hear, whether it's through conversations with colleagues or even with clients that I work with on the analytics and the RIMA side, that's definitely been a huge item on people's radar of recent. But still, COVID, right? We're not out of the woods. We hope that the vaccines and other things that we see are making an impact, but definitely keeping up with the COVID guidelines. And I almost, as I think Cindy would probably be a little closer to this, but I almost see a new season of fluctuation as different states and jurisdictions are trying to figure out, you know, how do we open, when do we open at this level, that level. So definitely keeping up with those guidelines. Other ones, working on the TPA relationship, 9%, internal claims process, 32%. Third of the participants are looking at their internal claims process, and then, you know, improving that data and analytics, being able to drive those conversations is always a great thing to be focusing on. So thank you very, very much for your participation on that. And I did notice there that, you know, a third of the folks that answered the poll are thinking about their internal claim procedures. How do they manage their claims internally? And Michelle, as we move into the next section here, basically what I did is I went through the 2015. I took the look at the 2015 survey results, where people were talking about what it's like within their organization managing risk. And then I took a look at the 2020 survey, and I said, you know, where have things shifted in people's perception, or in at least how they're reporting them to us? The participants who reported in 2015, how was that different than those who shared their survey results in 2020? So this first item here on the next slide, Michelle, is about self-administration. So thinking about, you know, your internal claim management processes. As we look at this, right, you have the 2015 on the left, you have the 2020 on the right, and these are the results of the survey that we put out to participants. The darker blue is the how many of those responding did some sort of self-administration on the GL side, and we see, you know, there was a good jump, a 36 up to 53% of those responding from 15 to 20. And we saw the same, not as significant perhaps, but we did see an increase on the comp side from just under 10% to almost 20% of individuals who are doing some sort of self-administration on the workers' compensation side. And right, there's a whole host of ways that you can do this. You can only self-administer a certain type of claim, or maybe a particular level of claim. But I wanted to bring Joe in at this point, because I know Joe has done quite a lot of work in this area, and just seeing kind of that shift, Joe, in people's engagement with this particular risk management strategy. Thank you very much for participating today and being willing to share some of your insights working with clients around this topic.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. And I think that the topic is right on point, right? I can certainly vouch for the results that you showed there, David, because I can tell you from a lot of the conversations that I am having with clients and a lot of the projects that we are currently engaged in, it is centered around self-administration, or at least the consideration of self-administration. And you heard Cindy speak about gap assessments and safety gap assessments. And a lot of my time and our practice's time is around the post-loss assessments, which can be termed operational assessments or self-administration assessments. And quite frankly, we have some clients that are looking at going into self-administration, and the reverse, right? We have some clients that are self-administered, and looking at the benefits of maybe do they want to go back to a TPA. But as David showed on that slide, there certainly had been between 2015 and 2020 an uptick in clients going to self-administration. And I would say in terms of what I've seen recently, there's no end in sight, at least for clients giving it consideration. And as David said, there are different levels that you can do on the work comp side. Maybe you're just going to look at your self-insured states or something like that, or where you have the most claims in terms of self-administration. On the GL side, it could be around maybe just self-administering your fast track claims. I know I've got a client or two that self-administers their gift card program, but then everything else goes out to a TPA. And so there's different levels of it. And I would just say that I think with COVID, we've mentioned COVID a couple of times today already, right? And I think with COVID, we just see a lot of organizations and certainly restaurants reevaluating their entire program. And that encompasses TPA or self-administration as well. TPAs have had many challenges. Have most, if not all, have had some sort of furloughing, layoffs, at least repositioning within their organizations. And I think that combined with the challenges that our clients have faced, the challenges of the restaurant industry, looking at commercial real estate, shrinkage, et cetera, has all led everyone to basically reevaluate where they want to allocate their costs and if there are benefits to self-administration. I would just say what we always tell folks that we deal with many clients who have it in their mind that they want to self-administer and they're going to self-administer. And what we always say is we think that at least a very in-depth conversation, if not a full-on assessment, a feasibility study, is necessary to be done before we make that jump into self-administration, right? We need to look at not only the ROI, but the pros and cons and what's involved in taking your program in-house and considering self-administration. And so I put together a couple of slides here that I'll walk through some of the bullets on, but this kind of highlights a lot of the benefits that we see with self-administration, as well as some of the challenges that we see that we hear from clients and things that we've seen as we've helped transition clients to self-administration. So in terms of the benefits, you can see here across the top, we speak to alignment, customers, and customization. And so under the alignment arrow there, we have a better ability to align with corporate mission and goals, right? And we hear from a lot of clients now that they really want everyone to understand their culture, right? And we have, I hear complaints that we feel that their partners, their TPAs and other partners don't truly get the culture and the importance of it. And so obviously by self-administering, that gives you that more control and that better ability to align with those corporate goals. The programs can reflect your core business philosophy. Again, even though the TPA would be operating under some special handling guidelines, right, and some customized guidelines, it still does not necessarily always get to the heart of core business philosophy unless you've got a dedicated unit, which you could say is sort of the best case scenario after self-administration. They're handling a lot of different clients, right? And so it is very difficult for them to realize everybody's core business philosophies and their corporate goals across all the various clients that they're dealing with. There's more of an increase in collaboration within the organization, right? So you may have some in-house nurses. You may have sites that have their own, nurses and doctors and such. And so there's different locations that have different supervisors and managers responsible for reporting claims. And so self-administration can certainly just increase all of that collaboration among all the responsible parties within the organization. We look at leave programs as well, right? Non-OC type of claims. And so many times you're dealing with HR and other divisions within the organization. And so self-administration can help kind of foster that communication and that integration between all the different organizations. And also safety, right? Cindy talked about this importance of safety, obviously, the pre-law side. And certainly we see a lot better alignment between safety and the claims group, if that claims group is in-house. In terms of customers, if you're dealing with on the GL side, right? There's certainly better protection of your brand. You're able to be more nimble, reach out quicker to the clients and make sure that they're to your customers and make sure that they are satisfied. There's better control through both your customers and employees. So a lot of it, clients are now going to what we call a claim advocacy model, getting, on the workers' compensation side. So getting away from that kind of adversarial relationship and making sure that the injured worker is well taken care of. So that can be improved more with in-house. And again, just overall satisfaction. And again, when you look at things like fast track and gift cards, et cetera, we can just increase the loyalty and the retention on the part of the customer. And in terms of customization, obviously we're able to specifically identify your areas of importance and customize a program with self-administration that is crucial to what you are trying to achieve. And it gives you better insight in where to invest your dollars around innovation, around RMIS systems, et cetera. There's more quality control oversight and just general control. And also you don't have to worry about the competing interests of a TPA. And you eliminate the risk of what a lot of TPAs have been going through recently with high turnover, with, again, layoffs and furloughs. So Michelle, do we want to go on to the next slide? And so, it sounds great, right? And again, a lot of clients are ready to take that plunge and move into self-administration, but certainly, like most things, there's pros and cons, right? And so there certainly are a lot of challenges that it's important that everybody consider before making that decision to go into self-administration. Not the least of which is around technology. And certainly I know David can speak even more eloquently than I to that, but RMIS systems, do you already have an in-house RMIS system? Even if you do, is it more of a data warehouse kind of a system? And will you need that everyday claim system? Do you want to, buy something off the shelf or try to develop that on your own? Unbundled services, you're looking at case managers, nursing services, all your different vendor arrangements with MSA vendors and things like that. You're now responsible for that on your own. Also, you've got the exposure for any kind of penalties that may be assessed and E&O claims and logistics. Again, that's a bit of a fluid situation now, right? With COVID and more people working from home, et cetera. But, if you, we go back to where we were, your facilities, are they able to handle an entire claim group? And also, are you able to be flexible enough to kind of have your HR take care of career paths and different organizational structures, for a claims organization within your daytime job of running a restaurant group or whatever that might be. Training, continual improvement. You're now responsible more for training around your claims front and jurisdictional updates on the workers' compensation side of things. as well as compliance, form filing, different SOX requirements that goes with self-administering. And then obviously just the human capital element of it, the hiring, the promoting, the bringing in the right people with the right expertise that you're now responsible for to deliver a high quality claims program. And the other thing that's very important to keep in mind is carrier requirements, right? You hear about various TPA approvals with different carriers. You have to make sure that your carrier is okay and has approved of you self-administering. And then finally, looking at a managed rollout. In other words, would you just be taking on claims from that point forward, the new claims that arise essentially, or would you be looking to take on the legacy claims as well, the ones that are with the TPA that you're leaving? So all things that need to be considered in terms of the complexities of self-administration. And Michelle, I guess before I turn it back over to David, I didn't know if I should pause for any questions that might have come in.
No questions at this time. I think we'll take some more at the end of the panel discussion.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. That was great. And even, I'm often asked, is there a correlation between what we're seeing on the claims side and what we're seeing on the survey side, really, as people report? And one of the things that I think I heard out of your comments there was, this can be a strategic decision, not just a financial decision. There's a lot of benefits that can come out of self-administration, and I kind of saw that a little bit in the data. There was a correlation between, on the comp side, those who did some sort of self-administration had lower claim costs, and by about $1,000. That I should caution people, don't immediately translate that into, if I go self-admin, therefore my costs go down $1,000. But we did see that correlation. On the GL side, costs were slightly higher. But I know I've been in part of conversations where people will say, you know what, it's actually important to us to own that relationship with the customer and to really manage, like you said, the brand of who we are and how we represent that. So it's a very complex decision to be made, and it was a great overview of a lot of the factors there. So thank you very, very much for that. Another area that we've seen a correlation between claim outcomes and kind of risk management best practices, right? The use of allocation models. And the interesting things here, Cindy, and I want to leave a couple minutes here at the end, so maybe just 30 seconds of thoughts on this or something. But between 2015 and 2020, we actually saw a little bit of a pullback on people reporting the use of an allocation model. And maybe just a quick thought on, what is this tool and how can it be used within the risk management context?
Sure, David, I'm an enormous fan of allocation models. You'd never ask a restaurant, if you ask any restaurant manager what their food costs look like, they know. But if you ask them what their claim costs look like, generally they have no idea. They get some sort of allocation of a percentage of insurance, and they aren't ever held responsible for what happens in their location. So an allocation model really focuses the operators on the true cost, even if you cap it, of those claims and how they impact them. They get way more involved in the handling of claims than they did before because they want to control that too. And when you partner it with an incident investigation, you get information on root cause to help prevent all of that. It can have a huge impact if it's designed and implemented properly.
Excellent. The next area that we've seen some correlation between, the cost outcomes and the risk management best practice, return to work programs. And Joe, I know you do a lot of work with this. We saw a little bit, and real quick on the correlation. This is a strong story here, where those obviously within the restaurant industry, quite a few of you are reporting that you use a return to work program, but we saw within the claim data, those who had a return to work program, there was a significant cost reduction on average of their claim cost. But we saw a little bit of a decentralization. You see 82 to 78% those who said they're using return to work, but then when we look at a component, a formal standard written job bank, a slight pullback on those who are centralizing that within their organization. A quick thought on that, Joe?
Yeah, honestly, David, this slide was a little bit surprising when you first showed it to me, because I know we get a lot of questions about return to work programs, creating job banks, et cetera, and we do a lot of work around that. I think what it might speak to, however, is more around the enforcement of having those return to work programs and having those job banks and having clients that adhere to the ADA requirements. So I think that clients still, for the most part, have the formal return to work program and may even have job banks created. But I think, and COVID certainly, again, to reference as we got into 2020, plays into that as well, and I think is a factor. But I just think that the enforcement of some of the AADA requirements has become a bit more lax in recent years. And again, certainly with COVID did not help that as well.
Excellent. And then the last thing we're going to look at today, we actually, in the previous iteration of the report, the second edition, we had identified a fairly good correlation between companies, firms that were doing drug testing and having some positive outcome on actually both the comp and the GL side. And you can just see from this graph here, the 2015 on the left, 2020 on the right. The two different colors are a couple different questions we asked about this. We perform random drug tests or we conduct post-accident drug testing. And you can just see that there was a fall off, right? Fewer people are doing that. And Cindy, I think that's just kind of the legal environment that we're in right now, but perhaps a quick thought on this particular kind of change that we've seen.
Well, you're absolutely right, David. So legalization of marijuana in a number of locations, the state laws changed, the workers' comp laws changed. So you used to be able to, decades ago, not pay workers' comp and decline a case if there was a positive drug test. Well, it's not a tool we have anymore. So with this, it's unfortunate that we can't use it, but we just have to really depend on those other tools we have that we've talked about, like the allocation programs, investigation, all those other things, return to work that help with that process. So.
Excellent. Well, Joe, Cindy, I just have to say a big thank you for joining us today. All of your insights are wonderful. Michelle, I know that we only have a couple minutes left here, but questions that came through?
Yes, so one question that came in for Joe was, real quickly, if we are considering making a move to self-administration, how can Marsh assist?
Well, thank you, Michelle. Yeah, and I think I briefly mentioned that we do, similar to what Cindy spoke to, safety gap assessments, we do operational assessments that looks at all your corporate structure, guidelines, policies, procedures, org charts, et cetera. But a branch of that is we do self-administration assessments. So we will actually do cost modeling as well, associated with potentially moving to self-administration from a TPA. So you can reach out to your client executive or myself, and we'd be happy to walk you through the process of what entails a self-administration assessment.
Awesome, thank you. Another question came in. We have two more quickly. This one I think is for you, David. Can you comment again on how to access the complete report?
Yeah, excellent question. And again, the way to kind of this report is offered for free to those who participate by providing their data and responding to the survey. So again, later this year, we anticipate launching, it'll be an email invitation. It's an initial quick survey to say, I want to participate, I don't want to participate. And then you can go into the full survey, as well as we'll coordinate gathering the claim data to produce everything. And then once it's all put together and developed, then we share the final product with those who participated.
Yep, thanks, David. I do want to add to that and say, though, that in the follow-up email that we're sending to those of you that participated, we are offering a quick snapshot opportunity for you guys to see how you benchmark against your peers if you did not participate. So I would jump on that opportunity if you're interested. Again, so if you did not participate in the study, you could get a sense of how you benchmark on some key areas. One last question for the group. Is the drug testing reductions largely due to OSHA pressure?
And Cindy, we'll toss that one over to you.
Well, it says OSHA, so I figured it's me. Yeah, so that was a big part of it. The OSHA regulation change that happened a couple of years ago, put so many restrictions and things around drug testing. That was definitely a big part. Legalization in states of substances, difficulty in testing. It's just a whole bunch of things working against that.
All right, and that's basically it, and right on time, it's 3 o'clock. So thanks everyone. I'd like to thank our panelists, Joe Griswold, David Olson, and Cindy Smell. Want to thank all of you for attending. I think there's one more question that just came through. There will be a replay, a recording following this event. We will send that out to you guys in about 2 days or so, so please look out for that. If you guys have time for one more question. Actually, I think it's gone, so we're good.
Okay.
All right, well, thanks again, everyone, and you guys have a great afternoon. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.